Hello guys, welcome to the second stream of today. I am so excited because with me today, not sure where hang on, we've got Dr. Benjamin Keep with us today, and I'm super psyched because he is an awesome learning scientist. I don't know if I've talked a lot on my channel before about the fact that I actually used to work in postgraduate education, and one of the most amazing things about working in education is it really gives you a great appreciation for the metacognitive skills of like learning how your brain actually works. And one of the things that used to frustrate me so much when I was teaching in postgraduate education was the fact that I would see my students make so many basic mistakes over and over again. Like, I truly believe that in any field, like anybody can master any field, like you just kind of have to have the right attitude, the right mindset, and the right approach to learning, because so much of the time when you're struggling to learn something, it is because you're getting it in your own way and kind of going about it wrong. And I would see this over and over again with my students. So since 2022, I have decided is the year I am finally going to learn marketing. Marketing terrifies me, and I have never been successful at learning anything to do with marketing. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to call in an expert just so that I can figure out what exactly it is that I'm doing wrong whenever I'm trying to learn marketing. So welcome, Ben, to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. And can I get you guys, can I get you just to introduce yourself to the guys in a couple of words?
Sure, yeah, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for having me here, that is. Yeah, so I'm kind of a reformed attorney, and then I went to grad school, have a PhD in learning science and technology design. Now I do research consulting and some teacher training, and I'm starting to grow a small YouTube channel. But I'm really interested in applying research to practice, basically applying academic research and any kind of research, all really to the kind of practical problems that people have. So this is why the topic of learning goals and trying to apply somewhat of what we know about learning to kind of something that actually impacts people's lives, I think
Yeah,
is
that's
interesting to
awesome.
me.
And I just noticed that in the poll that we've got going in the live chat, that people right now seem to be most focused on improving their craft as an author, as a writer for 2022. And that's also another big area of learning that I often struggle with, because I think we all think that art is pretty subjective. Like it's really difficult to quantify what good art is, and everybody has different personal preferences. So when it comes down to trying to find the right metric in order to measure what is good and not good art, when I was doing my NaNoWriMo project last year, I was like a total accountant, so obviously I sat down and made some SMART goals and KPIs to try and like measure this stuff. And the only metric I could really use to try and measure the quality of my writing is reader feedback, essentially. Like I was kind of thinking, I have no other way to measure this other than if people actually tell me that they think my writing is good. But there's kind of like a really long delay on that. So in accounting, at least, we talk about there being leading and lagging measures of a goal or something like that. And reader feedback it's a huge lag measure. Like if I have to wait until I finish a draft, which for this particular manuscript that I've been working on took like 2 months, and I'm still in the middle of revisions, and I don't think I'm going to be done with the revisions for another few weeks at least. Like waiting 3 months to get feedback on my writing kind of really sucks, and I think it really holds me back on trying to figure out how I can improve my craft. So what I would love to figure out on this stream is whether or not like we can find other ways of getting some indicators of like how I am improving, how I am learning to be better at my craft or at marketing, or whatever my goals for 2022 might be, just so I can kind of like iterate on that feedback cycle a little bit faster. So if you're watching there live with us, just pop down in the chat. Let me know in the poll like what you guys want to prioritize in 2022, because I am super fascinated by what everyone is going to be working on. And if you have questions, we'll be taking them during the stream, so just drop it in the chat and we will do our best to address them as we go. Otherwise, there will be a final opportunity to do some general Q&A at the end of the stream. So I'm looking forward to what you guys are thinking. So what I would really love to hear Ben's thoughts on is, as a teacher yourself and as a professional who has been working with loads and loads of other educators, what do you see learners struggle with the most?
Oh, that's actually a pretty pretty large topic. I think it depends on the environment that the learners are working in, and it also depends on kind of the learners themselves. It kind of depends on which culture of learning people find themselves in. So there's one common mistake that I see people making is that they don't really know they don't really have a precise idea of where they want to go, which is kind of this is the learning goals problem that this whole video is about. When you are just kind of vaguely want to learn mathematics, or you would like to get better at writing.
Oh God, Ben is already doing the live print of me because I've set my goal as learn marketing. Right. Oh God.
No, well, it was on the top of my mind, but I mean that's one kind of mistake I think that people tend to make, but there are other ways of kind of making almost the opposite mistake, where you have kind of a plan, you execute this plan, and you kind of do this blitz, or you do a kind of jam session, you do these kind of things, and you rapidly increase your performance level. So if I'm playing basketball and I play like I've never played basketball before, and I play ball, every day for 3 hours a week or something like this, by the end of that, I'm going to have noticeably improved. Like, I'm going to notice myself, other people will notice too. Like, I'm not going to be good, but I'm going to be a lot better than I started.
Yeah, definitely.
But then that feeling, sometimes the feelings are accurate, feelings of what we know, but there's sometimes that it's not very accurate, and especially it comes up during these kind of sprint kind of sessions, where if you're concerned about long-term learning, if you're concerned about something that's going to stick with you and maybe that you'll be applying to other kinds of contexts, then it can't just be the case that you like, oh, I spent a weekend studying everything there is to know about marketing. Now I'm a marketing whiz, off to the races, and I never have to go back. No, like there's lots of misconceptions. I actually have a course on misconceptions, an audio course on misconceptions, but there are lots of misconceptions about learning and about kind of what we know, and yeah, just how rapidly it takes to get there, whether or not mistakes, people will get down when they make mistakes, or confusion, or feel confused.
I think you're really hitting on the key struggle for me. So there is a poll now, a new poll in the chat, which is just trying to figure out what everyone is struggling with the most when it comes to learning. And for me personally, it's not necessarily knowing where to start, because there's just so much information out there on the internet that you can kind of like sit on Google or on Wikipedia or on YouTube, quite honestly, for a few hours and just go like, what is marketing, or like, what is good writing, and things like that. And you'll kind of get a feel for the scene. But for me personally, it's like after knowing, like after that first hour or two of research, like I find myself getting really, really overwhelmed because I find that when you're trying to set learning goals for yourself, you kind of get really into the weeds very quickly, because you don't have the benefit of knowing anything about the field that you're trying to learn in, and there's just so much information out there that it quickly goes from like the strategic level of, this is how this particular topic or this area works, and into like really into the details. Like, so Googling or YouTubing anything on like building your author platform, for example, like you've got 50 videos saying, oh, you should do AuthorTube, another 50 saying like Twitter is the place to be, and more people and news articles saying like book talk, that is what's really selling books these days. And I'm just like, I don't know which direction to go in. Like, all of these are directions that I can start, but how do I even figure out which one is the one I should be spending my time on? And more importantly, like, how can I actually measure whether or not I'm actually learning anything worthwhile? Because I can sit here and say, okay, I've read 6 books on marketing, or I've done like 7 things on Instagram. Did I learn anything from that? I don't really know. And so the one thing that I learned was like a thing when I was in postgraduate education is that normally when you're an expert in your field and you're looking to teach somebody something that you've got the expertise in, it's really easy to sit there and go, okay, well, like I know what the fundamental concepts are. I know strategically, the order in which you should learn things. But as a learner doing what I didn't know was a term before, but it's called self-directed learning. Like I don't have that ability to sit back and understand what that landscape is. So, but I'd love it if you could talk a little bit about what the research says around self-directed learning and how it's different when you're like, you as a learner are setting out to try and figure out how to learn something without guidance from a mentor or a teacher or something like that.
Right. Well, two points come to mind. One is that most of the academic research on, say, learning goals is really, as you say, from the perspective of a teacher trying to design learning goals, or from a curriculum designer where you have students that are going through multiple classes, and a lot of that is not, it's not irrelevant, but it's not as relevant as it might be for kind of the self-directed learner. So then if you look at the research on self-directed learning, well, a lot of that is actually also about teaching, about crafting, kind of like giving students some autonomy and agency in designing their own learning, or in kind of pursuing their own interests, or maybe doing their own projects or something like that. So certainly giving some amount of decision making over to the student. But there's not a tremendous amount of research on kind of, hey, you're a learner, and maybe there will be now that self-directed learning is much more prominent than it once was, say, 20 years ago. But it takes a while for academic research to catch
I
up to
really hope they
changing
do catch up,
circumstances.
because with everything that's going on with the gig economy these days, and I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there's been a lot of reports coming out on what they're calling like the creative economy, or the thing where basically people are no longer working like these traditional 9-to-5 jobs. They're kind of piecing together a living from a portfolio of all of these different income streams, and there's so many hats you have to wear when you are doing that, and the more hats you have to wear, the more things you have to learn about each of those different income streams and how to run the businesses and things like that. So I sure hope the academics are going to catch up on this, because it would be really great to have some scientifically researched and evidence-based principles, so that I'm not kind of sitting here wasting my time flailing around when I'm trying to just learn what I need to do.
Well, there's one, I mean, I think there's one, there's a couple of key differences between kind of creating learning goals as the learner, right? And that is that as the teacher, you kind of already know where someone's going, so you don't have to revisit your learning goals like midway through and be like, oh crap, is this right? I don't know, I don't know whether this is right or not. But the things that happen to us as we learn something is that our understanding of the topic changes, or our understanding of the skill changes as we're acquiring a skill. And so it has to be the case that when you set something out, whether it's vague or broad or specific, whatever your learning goal is, that you have to be revisiting this from time to time and being like, do I still want this? am I still in the right direction? You can end your, I mean, when we, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, when we talk about just say getting better at marketing or something, or getting better at craft, like you can be a much better technical writer than lots of other people. But if that's not what you want, if you want to publish novels, like that skill, there's just a mismatch there between what you want and what you're getting. And I mean, that's maybe a more obvious one, but there are subtle ones as well that you want to kind of always come back to redirect
I kind of wish
yourself
I had
a little bit.
time machine so that I could go back in time like about 6 months ago and tell myself that, hey, like maybe stop wasting like 8 hours a day like trying to promote yourself on Instagram, because like Instagram just sucked up so much of my time that I could have otherwise spent on working on my next book and releasing that. So anyway, lessons learned. And I guess like the other question that everybody watching might have is, Deb, like why are you getting a learning scientist to come and talk to us about this? Because like if what you wanted to do was learn marketing, like why wouldn't you invite a marketing expert? And I guess what I see really valuable about having somebody with Ben's expertise here is that if you learn the way to learn properly, that is going to pay off everywhere else in your business as a self-published author, because I'm not just learning specifically about how to market, like because my learning needs might change from year to year, or forget year to year, like quarter to quarter. I don't want to have to sit there and figure out the learning every single time that Twitter or YouTube changes its algorithm. I just want to kind of set my foundations right for learning, so that I just need to figure out what is the best way to learn every time, and then from there I can go forth and adjust my learning plan, knowing that I've got these sound learning principles to work off of whenever I have to learn something new, which at the rate that the Amazon algorithm is changing and what Amazon is doing, what Ingram Spark is doing, it's like literally every 3 weeks, like they change something different. Like I think the pace of change of what is happening in not just our industry of self-publishing or just publishing in general, but in all industries, it's just going so fast that I almost feel like you learn something and then like 2 months later it's already out of date because the world has moved on. So yeah, like I kind of regret all of the time I spent in uni, like learning things, because I'm just literally like nothing I learned in uni or in college, if you're North American, is like actually useful in my day-to-day life anymore. It's just it's terrible. But anyway, what? Oh yeah, sorry. Go on.
I think no, just I mean this something up about a question that you asked earlier, which is kind of one of the what are the pitfalls of something, and you were asking about how if you wanted to learn to get better marketing and you read a bunch of you could track how many books you read or whatever, and I think that there's one thing that comes up over and over again where people think they can learn without getting
Yeah,
their
that's a
hands
great point.
dirty and without making mistakes. So it's like, well, I'm gonna read these textbooks, and I'm not actually going to say I'm going to read a physics textbook, and I'm not actually going to like solve physics problems or get involved with a physics experiment. Sorry, my background is in science stuff. These kinds of like trying to learn at a distance is a bad idea. So when you were talking about like it's like you can sit there like, well, what social media platform do I want to learn on, or do I want to what's the best one? And it's like, well, you can sit there and ponder forever, or you can try to find the ways that you could kind of, well, how can I take a step in using one of these social media platforms, and then yeah, maybe you end up spending 6 months on one that you figure is not that helpful, but that is still helpful. You might critique yourself and be like, well, maybe I shouldn't spend so long, maybe I should have realized earlier, but that's still at least like you've gotten your hands dirty and you've started to Yeah,
Oh
figure
God.
out what's working and or maybe what doesn't
I'm
work,
so
you know?
guilty.
Like,
I'm so guilty of sitting on
um,
YouTube and just binging AuthorTube and just going, oh, like, yeah, like I totally know all about the querying process. Like, even though I have not ever tried to attempt to send any sort of query letters to any agents out there, I'm just like, I've watched all of Alexa Dom's videos on querying. So, yeah, I totally know what's going on in querying. Yep, no, I
so
have no idea about querying.
yeah, we all are
All
guilty of
right,
that.
so I'm just conscious we've been chatting a little bit generally, so I want to start getting into some specifics. So let's go and start critiquing my actual learning goal of learn marketing, which is just terrible, absolutely terrible, guys. And let's start by, I guess, breaking down the terminologies. Oh yeah, go on.
Before you do that, do we wanna address the question, or do we wanna
Oh
Exmond, I
yeah,
think, had asked
let's
a
have a look. So I think, let me get my little overlays going. Ooh, sorry. There we go. So Xman says Xman's goal is to get submissions ready and try and get slush pile feedback or judge feedback. And judge feedback, I assume, is if you're doing submissions to like journals or writing competitions, something like that. Um, that's gonna be a pretty that the sound of that goal really intimidates me, to be honest. And that's actually a really interesting question from a learning perspective, because generally if you're going towards the traditional side of publishing, from what I hear, and I have not gone through this personally because I'm just like, that does not sound like a game I want to play. You literally sit there and send out a whole bunch of query letters or submission letters or whatever, and it just kind of goes into this void, this black hole. Brandon Sanderson, I think when he started, he had queried his first novel, Elantris, and sent it to the agent, Moshe Feder, I think that's how you pronounce it. And it literally sat in a pile of papers somewhere in Moshe's office. And the agent did not discover it until I think he was moving houses, at which point he picked up the manuscript and went, hey, like, this is the thing I'd like to publish. And that was like 2 years later. And so, you know, what can you do from a learning perspective to try and figure out how do you even get feedback when everything that you're doing when you're getting your hands dirty is it's just going into this void?
I was hoping you would answer that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the one thing that I think, well, there's a couple of different things that relate back to what you were saying earlier, where one, you could have you know, a writing community, maybe like this one, or like others, where you can trade manuscripts to get feedback on, but that doesn't really solve the publishing, you know, the traditional publishing problem. Um, but you know, you were talking about earlier, which I think relates to the same point about, you know, you have these uh, lagging indicators, you know, where you've written something and then you don't really get any feedback on it, if any at all, from anyone who's relevant for a long period of time. Um, but and Exman has also asked this question about, you know, like, it's not a practical like, writing is not a practical problem to solve, um, or you know, kind of what's an example of solving a physics problem in the writing world. And I think, I mean, I you guys are the writers, so so feel free to tell me I'm wrong here. But in a way, I do think that writing is solving a problem, um, in the sense that, like, when I write something, I want to communicate something to other people, right? And if I write something that I think I'm communicating X, and then when I reread it, I see the ways that I am communicating X, whatever that is. If that's a, you know, I mean, and that can be a fiction, or I write mostly nonfiction, but that can apply in fiction as well, where, you know, you are trying to convey a mood, right? You are trying to convey a character, and you don't want to spend 100 pages developing this character, right? So a lot of times, what you're trying to do is you're trying to find those key sentences, key phrases that can express, you know, parsimoniously, but also beautifully, what, you know, um, what this character is about, or, you know, what this conflict is about, or what have you. Um, and usually I'm not a fan of, say, people judging their own, you giving yourself feedback is in a lot of contexts isn't
Oh, because of
necessarily
like the
great.
Dunning-Kruger effect.
But with
Because I
writing,
literally, when I'm looking at my own work, is it the lack of distance? Is it the lack of knowledge for a robust self-critique? Because I guess I'm curious because I feel
yes,
like
yeah.
self-reflection
But
is a really important part of developing a sense of self-awareness about the quality of your own work. And I know, like, writers generally, we're all just like, everything I write is terrible. Like, you kind of go through this wave, sorry, with the camera going this way, like, where you're like, this is an awesome idea, and then you're like, this is the worst thing that has ever been written in the history of all writing. And then, like, sometimes afterwards, like, you kind of curve back up and you're like, that was all right. That was not too bad. But I don't know about you guys, but most of the time I'm just like, nah, this just flat out sucks. This is like worst thing I've ever written. I should not be writing. I am a terrible person. Oh, like, what do you think?
I think that, yeah. So I mean, in a lot of cases, so if you are in the training literature, for instance, you want people to give themselves feedback, even if you have an expert coach, like an expert writing coach, to help you. Like, you still want to uh, try to look at your own work first before they come in to tell you what you did wrong, because um, that process, right, is developing a sense of self-reflection. Um, and so I think that the one advantage that writers have is that they know what
Oh,
they're
that's
trying
very
to
true. Yeah,
express,
I hadn't thought about it
right?
like that.
Like no one else knows except the writer, right? And so, and a lot of times other people could read it and be like, I didn't like it, but I don't know what you're trying to get across. So how, like, there's that problem. Um, but as to the wave that you allude to, I feel like, you know, the best mood, I guess, to be in, critique mood to be in, is neither of those extremes, right? Obviously, if you think that idea is awesome, it's great, everything's 100% awesome. And then if you're down in the dumps, where, yeah, I think every creator feels that way. They're just like, wow, everything about this just sucks. You want to be at a place where you're thinking about your own goals. These aren't learning goals necessarily, but your own goals for the writing, right? What is the purpose of this passage? What is the purpose of this chapter? Is it serving that purpose? And you want to be at a place where you can say, hey, this part actually, it's okay at serving that purpose, and this part is what's not working. So if you can start to iteratively, rather than kind of throw everything away, I think a lot of times the the iterative approach, where you're looking just like, what's the biggest thing that is wrong here? What's the biggest thing that can be fixed? And then you fix the biggest thing first, and it's like, okay, well, that's a little bit better, and then
That's
you
an
can move on from
excellent tip.
there.
I used to take some evening classes at Juilliard for music composition, and I had a teacher there. And the one thing he would never let us say in class is, like, when we heard our own compositions back in, he would just be like, when you critique your own stuff, I am not accepting any statements where you're just like, I hate it. He's like, if you're going to say I hate it, I want you to tell me why. Like, what is it specifically about your work that makes you hate it? Is it something about the harmony? Is it something about the structure of the piece? Is it something about the instrumentation? Like, you must be specific about why you do not like the work that you have produced, because if you can't diagnose that specificness, you have no chance of trying to fix it. Like, you just kind of throw up your hands and go, oh, it sucks, I'm a terrible artist, and you just kind of, you never grow from there as an artist. All right, so that is awesome. Thank you, X-Men, for asking them, for making the comment, because that just, like, was a hugely interesting discussion for me. I am conscious of, like, trying to get some practical stuff done. So what I want to do is just skip ahead to the homework that Ben gave me. So Ben did give me homework ahead of this live stream. I did do it. It is probably, like, not the best homework that I have turned in ever, but I did do something. So for you guys watching, Ben has not seen this. He literally jumped on Skype with me, like, and I pinged the link to him. So I'm gonna flip over and share my screen with you guys. And these are some key questions that Ben asked me to answer. when we were talking about like how to break down this massive goal of learn marketing into something achievable. So I'm going to hand over to Ben and we shall commence the live crit of this session with the hope that by the end of this session, I'm going to have, you know, an actual goal that is achievable, that is not just learn marketing. Over to you, Ben.
Okay, cool. So I've just opened up this thing. I've kind of got a bigger screen on my window here so that I can read it. So I mean, I want to say at the outset that this is already probably more than what most people do, in terms of when they, you know, I think it's actually already rare for someone to be like, okay, I'm going to take this seriously as a learning goal, and I'm going to, you know, kind of draw on resources or kind of pursue this in a somewhat serious way, and not just kind of a wishful way. Okay, so goal is to learn marketing. That's fine for a title. That's fine. So yeah, one of the questions I asked Deborah was, you know, in what situation or context here, self-publishing books. So that already pushes away so many other things that you could read about marketing. And yes, so I'm just kind of reading what does so I in some earlier discussions, you know, we were talking about this difference between, you know, the learning goal and the production goal. So I wanted to explain that if people are reading that on the screen, where, you know, the learning is something that happens inside your head or inside your head body kind of nervous system. The production goal is kind of like an outcome that you have. Like, I want to sell a book. That's a production goal. I want to learn to write means you're actually a good writer. And the overlap between those things is not necessarily, you know, 100%. Okay. This third question, sorry, I'm kind of running down the questions for a second here. But this, or I guess fourth question about what previous conceptions or understandings do I have, I think is really key to developing kind of, it does so many things for you in terms of furthering your learning, because it starts off where it kind of puts you in the right place, because you can say, okay, this is what I know, this is what I don't know. So it's going to lead you to the activities or kind of the actions that you're going to take. But it also ignites that prior knowledge, so that you're going to be linking that prior knowledge to what you're learning. So Deborah says she understands ROI. She needs to, you know, build her own audience on a platform that she controls. Right, the marketing funnel.
Oh,
that
I
everyone
should
hears
say
about.
on this point, like doing this question was the most difficult question to answer, because I was just like, I don't know. I've done a lot of reading. I've done a lot of watching videos on AuthorTube and like reading a lot of the posts in, you know, some of the Facebook groups like Craig Martell's 20 books to 50K, that sort of thing. And like there's a whole pile of concepts out there that I didn't even include in here. Like the one that people might be the most familiar with is the I don't want to say assumption, because I feel like enough self-published authors and traditionally published authors have tested it out, but like the general principle or law that the best form of marketing you can do is to have a new book coming out. So the concept of front list selling backlist. So which I think is always the biggest problem I have with marketing in general, right? Because I always feel like no matter what kind of ongoing marketing activity I choose to do, whether it's Twitter or Book Talk or Instagram or like working on my mailing list or something like that, I'm just like, every hour I spend doing that thing is an hour I cannot spend working on the next book. And if the next book is the best marketing I can do, then like, you know, but like I'm writing fantasy right now. And when I'm not writing fantasy, I'm doing kids' picture books. And both of those things, like I cannot release a book every 2 weeks. It's just like physically impossible for me. Unlike, you know, if you're writing in a genre like romance or erotica or something. And so yeah, that is kind of really difficult for me to balance. And trying to answer this question also was really illuminating, because once I sat down and thought about like what is it that I understand about the funnel, right? And I've got what my understanding of the funnel is spelled out on screen. And when I put that down, I was like, okay, like when I put the funnel down like this, I can really kind of diagnose where I'm not confident with the whole, selling books process. And like I think the biggest problem I have is with that first step, like the finding potential readers or customers who will like my book, and that's really the area that I feel like I lack knowledge in. Sorry guys, planes just flying over my apartment. I live in a flight path, because I feel like if I can convince somebody to take a chance on clicking through into the look inside on Amazon, and I can get them reading that first sentence, I'm reasonably confident that I could get like half of the people decide to continue reading the next sentence, the next paragraph, the next page until they get to the end of the sample and click through the buy, hopefully. I don't have any ideas about what kind of conversion rates are good. I would love to measure that. But like generally, I think my problem is like, how do I get people in the top of that funnel? So doing this was a huge exercise in at least making the first step of breaking down that large goal, because now I know that I'm not trying to learn marketing to grow my Twitter presence or something like that. I'm trying to learn marketing so I can convince. Isn't even convinced. So I can drive more people to the sales page on Amazon or on Barnes and Noble or wherever else I've got my book, so that I can get them to click on the sample chapters and read that, because I'm pretty confident if I can get them to read the sample chapter, I can convince a whole bunch of them to actually buy my book. Ben, any thoughts to add on that?
No, just as you're talking, I mean, it sounds like you're already getting more and more specific. I mean, really, the thing that you are focusing on is like, how do you get people to click, right, on Amazon or on Barnes and Noble or wherever you're doing. And so it's like, okay, well, that really needs to be the focus of your learning on marketing. So you can learn a lot of background information about using Twitter to help promote things. You can learn a lot of background information on this, but I think always coming back to, it's like, okay, I mean, that to me sounds like, okay, well, that's an outcome variable that you care about deeply, right? And so it's like you want to be the best at getting, or as good as you can be at getting people to click, right? Because once they click, then you think you can convert them.
And an assumption that I will say right now is not necessarily evidence supported, because I don't know that data.
Right. Well, you can cross that bridge when you come to it, yes. But I think if the way that I tend to think about learning goals, or the way that I recommend that people have learning goals, is to always frame them in terms of what you will be able to do. Now, obviously, there's no guarantee that you're going to have, with most of the skills that we care about, there's no guarantee that we're going to win whatever we're trying to win. There's no guarantee that we're going to win that chess match, right, or that poker tournament or something like that. There's like luck and chance involved in many things, and marketing as much as anything, right? But you want to be thinking in terms of what I will be able to do. I will be able to get have a strong chance at getting these this high level of clicks. So if I did, if I published 4-5 books, like my average, I want my average to be X amount of clicks or something like this. And so you want to be able to do it. So the learning part is being able to do it reliably, and then the outcome part is actually, like, of course, what
Oh, that
actually happened.
makes so much sense. So,
Because of
for anyone who has not ever worked in education before, or has, as a student, always skipped past like the first 3 pages of the course syllabus, or the outline or whatever, the thing Ben's talking about here, I know the terminology for these things as like learning outcomes. And I swear to God, like these were the worst things to write ever, and I cannot believe that I'm going to sit down here and try and write some learning outcomes for myself. But I never actually understood how to write the learning outcomes. But what Ben just said there about considering that learning outcomes have 2 components, like the learning part and the outcome part, like you'd think I would have realized this because they're called learning outcomes. But like, yeah, that just never clicked for me together before. So, oh, all right. Let's sit down and try to write some learning outcomes, I guess. Was there anything else you wanted to say on my little homework before we start?
So sorry, the last part on the what component skills are needed. I mean, you kind of just list the things that you're bad at.
Oh God,
That
yes.
you think you're bad at. um, whereas like I might think about if you're talking about, say, like, okay, I'm focused on getting clicks on Amazon, for instance, because you publish on Amazon. Um, then it's like, okay, well, what are the things that are going to get me there? Like, one might be, develop a large social media following so that whenever you publish a book, you've got X percentage of your followers who are clicking on it, right? One might be, I mean, you had mentioned like having an awesome cover for a genre. So one might be like cover design. Another might be ads, running ads in appropriate places. Another might be, identifying the market that wants to buy your books. These are more of what I'm thinking when I think of component skills. And you know, if you kind of, I mean, there's a danger in breaking things down too much, because then you kind of think of everything as these separate things and you don't integrate them. But if you start to break it down a little bit, it's helpful because you're like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to work on anything else except cover design. Like that, I just want to make a good cover. And you can you can start to look at your old covers. I mean, we know this with like YouTube thumbnails. I feel like you look at your old YouTube thumbnails and you're like, yeah,
For the record, I am
man, that's
surprised that
terrible.
anybody
And it's
watching
like,
right now, or has been watching my channel before, I'm surprised that you guys even clicked on my old thumbnails. They are just like the worst. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. Hopefully I'm doing a better job now. And as a sidebar, just while we're talking about all of these author platforms, like, no lie, guys, if I were to pick a social media platform which has directly helped with improving my skills as a writer, as a storyteller, it is actually YouTube. Because when you're making long form content on YouTube, and just the whole upload process of doing the thumbnail, thinking of the title, and writing the description, it really does hone your skills as a writer, as a storyteller, of thinking like, how would I summarize what this video is about. So if you literally substituted the video content for your book, the description for your blurb, and the title as well, and the thumbnail for your cover, like, what I have found is that I'm using the exact same skills in both instances, whether it is doing a YouTube video or whether it is thinking of my book. And this week, I just finished doing 4 iterations of my blurb for the book that I'm currently working on, the fantasy novel. And the blurb was something that I tried to do last year before NaNoWriMo, because I had like these great aspirations of, I'm going to totally write to market. So I'm going to think of the cover and the blurb and write that first, so that I write the whole novel around that, and I will know that it will sell because I have written the cover and the blurb to market. And like, I couldn't do it, guys. Like, I just really struggled to actually make that work. But coming back to that a couple of months later, with like having practiced that skill doing YouTube videos, like the blurb was actually a whole lot easier to write that time around, and probably was also helped by the fact that I had actually written and finished the manuscript at that point, so I knew what the story was about. But even so, like, it had taken a couple of iterations before I finally got to the point where I was like, you know what, this is actually the right way to frame it for the audience, and to actually get the tone promises in the blurb consistent with the actual tone promises of what actually happens in the story. So yeah, but like all the other things that Ben's just mentioned about like the component skills, this is honestly where I struggle, because I feel like there are so many directions you can go in, like because the question becomes, literally for me at least, it is literally, how can I drive traffic? Like, what skills can I learn to best drive traffic to? And I'm just going to stick with the Amazon page for now, because Amazon is like literally 90% of all my sales, even though I am wide for my other books. So when it comes to that point, like there are just so many different methods of driving traffic that I feel like the parameter I kind of have to set around this whole thing is I need a method that is sustainable, which I think does rule out several platforms to begin with. So just kind of with the basics of like how Book Talk or Instagram works, like you kind of have to be posting every single day or multiple times a day. And I can say from my experience of doing Instagram for my kids' books, it is literally like the kind of content that I post over there is unique content. So when on my Instagram, I actually do separate illustrations on a weekly basis. I do a whole bunch of extra bonus content for reader engagement and as reader magnets to get people to follow me on Instagram. And what I tack on at the back of every single Instagram post is like a, hey, like I have this kids book, which is, you know, doing more of the same thing that you're seeing on my Instagram page. And it does drive sales. Like I have been getting click-throughs from Instagram and getting sales as a result of these backlog of posts that I do have on Instagram, even though I haven't actively posted on Instagram for the last 2.5 months, basically, since I totally mistimed my schedule and tried Nano. But that kind of is the crux of my problem with marketing, particularly because doing these high value reader magnets, for example, which I'm sure everybody on stream or watching the replay is thinking about, like doing reader magnets is something quite time consuming. So another person in my writing group, her Nano project was doing 2 reader magnets, which were both prequels to her main book, which she is in the process of revising. And like writing a 25K word reader magnet, like is something that I hope would have a good conversion rate in terms of getting people to sign up to your mailing list, which you've then got a further step of making sure that they're engaged on that list so that you can therefore announce to your list you've got a new book coming out, and then they will hopefully all click through to the link and buy it. But like, you know, it's a lot of work. Like it took her 2 weeks to write the 20K reader magnet. There's still revisions and further editing to go on that. And I guess what I want to figure out how to do with my marketing is I would like something that is that I can sustainably do on like a weekly. I'm gonna say weekly, probably not gonna be weekly the way that my track record has gone, but something I can kind of let's say confine to 10 hours of work per week, let's say. Inclusive of the learning. I don't know how possible that is, but from what Ben was saying before about like the need to actually get your hands dirty and try things out instead of just, you know, sitting there consuming, like passively consuming information about how a certain thing works. I'm kind of hoping that the 10-hour allocation will be okay, because like if 9 hours of it is like, you know, actively trying stuff and learning from those mistakes, then like, oh, I can kind of get there. I don't know. What do you think, Ben?
Well, I think that I mean this goes back to what you were saying earlier at the beginning, where this kind of decision paralysis, where it's like there are so
Yes.
many things I can do potentially, right? And you're trying to figure out what the right one is or the best one is for you. And I think there is value in that process. And certain things are going to work better for some people. Just yeah, the amount of hours that they have to commit to it, or maybe like what the platforms that they're familiar with, or whatever. But I think that decision matters less than getting good at something. And so, like, if you're like, hey, I'm gonna write these, is it
reader
reader
magnets, that's what
magnets?
we
Is
call
that
them.
what you said? Right. So it's like I'm gonna like maybe that's not as efficient, as something else, but someone has had success doing it, right? Like if you're skilled at any of these things, you can probably make them work, unless they completely go under, like I don't know. You can't do that anymore for some reason. If you're like in Flash and you become the best Flash designer and then Flash goes away. But in most cases, I think just saying, hey, I'm going to commit to learning in this area. I'm not sure 100% if this is the absolute best thing to do, but you don't
That's
know what the
true.
best thing to do is yet because you're not the expert. So it's kind of like, well, just walk along this path for a little while and then check in later on and be like, hey, how is this going? And I mean, it's a little touchy about knowing when to check in because you can check in a little bit too early and kind of cut
Yeah.
yourself short, just before you're kind of going to make good on it. But you want to at some point, if you think you're reasonably skilled at it and it's not working, and by that time you also have a better sense of kind of what the overall
Yep.
field is like through conversations with people. And so then it's like you can always change gears. There's nothing that I don't know. You think of that time that you've spent learning something that isn't applicable right now as
Yeah.
being wasted. But I know, I mean, sometimes I think it is, but I don't. But a lot of times it isn't. A lot of times that has taught you something that maybe you can carry with you to a different domain. If you've been focusing on learning things deeply, then hopefully you'll be able to make some connections between what your skill was before, and you can learn the next marketing thing that you want to do because there's going to be new platforms, there's going to be new techniques and
That's
everything
so
like that.
helpful to hear. So let me just sum up and make sure I'm getting the right takeaways here. So what I'm hearing Ben say is just literally, Deb, stop overthinking this. Just pick a thing and learn it for a constrained period of time and just literally move on. Like, obviously don't pick like something that is totally untested and there's nothing in the market to suggest that method would even actually work. But if I have heard time and time again from various experts in the field, there are various people who have said that, look, my mailing list does sell books, then I can't really go wrong by just saying, okay, I am going to, in the first quarter of this year, really focus on building my mailing list, right? And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work, but I will still learn something translatable from building the mailing list, which will be hopefully an improved skill at connecting with, readers, audience, people who like my writing. So is that right, Ben? Have I taken away the right message? All right, all right, all right.
Yes,
Okay,
for
so
sure.
with that in mind,
For sure.
because social media is just like absolutely doing my head in, and Instagram has just really burned me out really badly, I am going to set the constraint as I will focus on building slash growing slash developing engagement. I can't spell engagement on my non-existent right now mailing list, which kind of bums me out because like I know I need a separate list for this different book that I've got. I already have a list for my kids' book, which I have neglected for like months and months. But whatever, Deb, just pick a thing and move on. I have picked a thing, I'm moving on. Okay, so time bound. Yeah.
The other thing you want to keep in mind is, how long does it
Oh
take
God.
to grow some of these things? Because, like, I was just reading the other day about, podcasts and how it's like, hey, if you keep doing your podcast for like 2 years, a lot of not every podcast, but like 70% of podcasts or something, it's like, okay, well then they've
Yeah.
become at least somewhat sustainable, after 2 years, and it's like, well, 2 years is a long time, and maybe a lot of people get discouraged before that time, so maybe it's just
Yeah.
a weed out effect, um, but
All right,
yeah,
so let's have a think about that. That's kind of like, I don't know, the funnel applies to the mailing list, right? Like, so basically, the thing you need to get people to do is you need to get them to subscribe in the first place, and usually that's with some sort of reader magnet of some sort. And then after they subscribe, you need what Tammy Labrecque, and I don't know how many of you guys on stream have read her book. It's called Newsletter Ninja, and it is fantastic. I will put a link in the description after this so that you can go check it out. But you need some sort of onboarding sequence, like to kind of, one, get past the filters in their inbox, but two, also to keep engaging them. And that is the mistake I have been making with my existing mailing list, like the paramount mistake that Tammy says every single author makes, and that is, I only email them when I want them to buy something for me. So I think what I need to do is look at the onboarding sequence, get that in place, and ensure there is a high give to ask ratio, which is what she calls it. And then the next thing after the onboarding sequence is you basically need ongoing engagement so that they don't forget about you in between newsletters. And this is kind of interesting because, like, the high profile examples that I personally follow and subscribe to, both Brandon Sanderson and Will White, they are very sporadic with their newsletters. Like, Brandon Sanderson only releases a newsletter every quarter, I want to say. And they're long, like the quarterly newsletters are long because it's kind of like a roundup of everything that he's been doing. Will White basically doesn't put out newsletters anymore. I think the last newsletter he put out was like maybe 3 years ago. Like, so ever since I discovered Cradle and actually subscribed to his newsletter, like, I don't think I've gotten a single newsletter from him because Will White has chosen to focus all of his marketing on basically, I think, Twitter and Facebook. So that is not a good model for me. The frequency that I have read in Newsletter Ninja is like weekly. Apparently, you should be emailing your list weekly. And I'm just like, I literally don't think anybody would be that interested in hearing from me like every single week. I know I personally have loads of emails in my inbox from all these things that I subscribe to, which like literally are just cluttering up my inbox, and I hardly ever click on them. But yeah, I don't know. Like, the other rule that Tammy says is do not approach your newsletter using your own personal newsletter subscription behavior as a guide for readers, apparently. So I think I'm going to go somewhere in the middle. I'm going to say on a monthly basis. Lots of question marks there. But Ben said to pick something and move on. So I'm picking something. I'm picking monthly and moving on. Oh, God.
The other thing to think about when you, I feel like you've made this point in several of your videos, is that the behavior of a successful writer. By successful, I mean, like, financially successful, publishing lots of books. I don't mean to is different than the behavior of a beginning writer or someone who's kind of on the road to success, right? So it's like it's not necessarily the case that you should, like, and this is sorry, comes back to another mistake that a lot of learners make, is that they look to see what experts do and then they're like, well, I'm just going to imitate what they do, which it can be helpful, right? If you're playing chess or something and you imitate a chess move in the exact same position. But what a lot of learners tend to do is that they imitate without necessarily realizing that there's a difference, in the situation, or there's a difference between kind of the context.
Yeah. All right. Oh, so cool. All right. So all right. Let me. If I consider that a weekly newsletter is kind of what, like, the pros who have got their stuff sorted out are doing, then I think monthly is probably a good baseline to aim at.
But I don't. I don't create more work for you. I just
Oh
saw a
God,
little
oh
point
God.
being solved, that's all.
But you know what? I do think like even if I did bump it up to like a weekly newsletter, I still think it probably would not compare to the level of work that I was doing on Instagram because I was literally posting things every single day, and it just like it was a huge time suck. Like basically all my Instagram time before that I was spending is now replaced with writing time with the writing streams in the morning, and I'm just like I would have to give up one or the other if I was going to make Instagram work. So all right, newsletter it is, monthly basis it is. All right, so I've kind of figured out that my components of a mailing list. So the first thing that I need to do is to grow the list. Now, so growing the list, let's say. So the first thing I did when I did my kids' book was I was already part of a community that was just like full of my target audience. And in fact, I was part of that community of parents who were trying to raise bilingual kids and struggling to find Cantonese English books before I even had the idea of writing a Cantonese English book because I was looking for the same thing. And so growing my list was fairly easy. Sorry, I shouldn't say fairly easy. I should say getting the initial influx of people to subscribe to my mailing list for my kids' book was relatively easy in the first place because I literally made one post in a Facebook group and like got a whole crap ton of subscribers from it. But I think for a prose novel, especially fantasy, it's going to be a very different challenge simply because fantasy as a genre is so large and also because there are just so many fantasy authors out there. It's really kind of hard, I think, to stand out from the crowd. One thing I have read is that there is a guy called Derek Murphy. He runs the Creative Indie blog. I don't know if you guys know it, but he's got a couple of articles out there about how he was able to grow a massive list before he'd even published by running giveaways. And giveaways are a thing that are constantly running, even in my kids' book niche as well. So I think a giveaway is probably my best shot at doing that. So I guess I'm going to be relying on giveaways. Which GG to my marketing budget because I will actually have to buy other people's books, which I'm happy to do, but like it is an additional cash outlay to actually run the giveaways. So with the giveaways, I know I need to learn more about the laws and regulations that apply. Because the last time I ran a giveaway, I restricted it to like 5 countries, I want to say, and I had to exclude Quebec in Canada because there were like all sorts of weird laws about the fact that you actually had to publish a giveaway in some sort of local gazette in both English and French. And I was just like, I'm not doing that. So I need to learn about laws and regulations that apply to international giveaways because that's probably what I'm going to have to do because I wouldn't be targeting local audiences as well because I think most of the market for this genre, like by and large, I would expect the majority of sales to be US based. The other possibility, I guess, is Facebook ads. Like a lot of people go on and on about how effective Facebook ads are supposed to be. So learn how these work, I guess. Oh, I don't know. Like Ben's just like sitting staring at my screen going, these are terrible learning outcomes, Jeff. Oh my God.
No, this is great. This is actually, I mean, all of these things are, now that you've kind of gotten down into the specifics, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's like you can go read about how Facebook ads work, and it's insanely easy with Facebook ads, at least, to get your hands dirty. Like, you just literally run an ad campaign for like $10 and just see what happens. And you can look at the dashboard, you can change things, you can target. So, I mean, once you've started this process, because really, from the learner's perspective, goals are really useful for telling you 2 things. They're useful for telling you what activities you should be doing, like what are the things that you should be doing next to learn. And then they're also helpful for telling you, well, like, what are the ways that you would know whether you have actually learned this thing. And so, if you can run a couple of successful, Facebook ad campaigns, well, then that that is some evidence that you have learned how how Facebook ads work and can at least structure an ad campaign
All right.
successfully.
So if
So
I
yeah.
if I try to attach a learning outcome goal thing to this one, would trying to say, sorry, my cat's just trying to nibble on my wrist every time I want to type right now. Dude, can you not? If I say the magic words, I will be able to add one. I'm just gonna start with 100 subscribers because that was also my goal when I was starting my YouTube channel. I will be able to add 100 subscribers. Sorry, should I say organic? I don't know. I'm just gonna say 100 subscribers to my mailing list by the end of February via giveaway. Number to be determined. Like, is that a reasonable learning goal to have?
I think it kind of
Not even sure it's a learning goal, to be honest. It's like kind of an outcome.
right. Yeah. You've kind of mixed up the learning goal and the
Yes.
production goal a little bit. So it's like adding 100 subscribers, that is something that you want to accomplish, right? That is a kind of performance, or that is a task that you are doing,
Yep.
right? That you want to do. The learning goal, which I mean is a little bit more nebulous here, but is like I want to be able to create really successful newsletters, right? And so then creating a successful newsletter, well, what are the things that go into that? Then, then it's like, well, I want to be like, there are certain probably ways of doing giveaways that are better than other ways, right? So I want to be able to create effective giveaways. I want to have a high, I mean, I'm confusing the two, but one thing, you could put on the outcome thing, is about like click-through rates on your newsletters. That's something to pay attention to. There are all things that you kind of pay attention to monitor the success of your newsletter. Keeping in mind of always that your newsletter's success is only an approximation of your skill level.
All right, great stuff here coming from Beth. So I think for me, like we could sit here for another 3 hours and watch me try to wrangle these into some sort of reasonable format. But for me personally, this session with Ben has been tremendously helpful because now I actually have a direction of where I want to go with this goal of learn marketing, and knowing that I am specifically targeting having a really engaged newsletter as my production goal, like my outcome that I want to use to try and drive sales to the Amazon page, like that makes the whole thing feel a whole lot less intimidating because I know that having made that strategic decision, I'm not going to be splitting my focus over like 4 different social media platforms and just, not being able to effectively learn anything about using any of those platforms in the 10 hours a week that I've got. Whereas I feel like if I kind of take that 10 hours a week and really just put it towards growing the newsletter, then I should do a lot better because that's like being able to spend 10 hours of like deep learning on one particular thing, which hopefully should result in like a faster growth in the skills required to actually do that thing successfully. Ben, is there any research out there on, like, is it good to have a more singular focus when trying to learn something new, or is it better to like space things out and try to tackle a whole bunch of different skills?
It kind of depends. It kind of depends on where you're at in the learning process, and it kind of depends on what your ultimate goals are. Um, uh, in the beginning, when you don't know anything, it's a lot more helpful to focus in on kind of one area and to try to understand that fairly well. But as you get better, that stops being as effective, and so then usually, one of the terms here in the literature is called interleaving, where you kind of you might say work on, if you're a tennis player or something, like work on forehands and then work on
Yeah.
volleys and then work on serves or something like this. Usually you're better off kind of doing that, instead of having these long blocks of, you're spending 3 hours working on a serves and then 3 hours working on fence. You're better off kind of mixing those up. So you're spending like 10 minutes working on each one, because it challenges kind of your body and your brain to do something new. And so at some point, you're going to be at the point where you're going to feel like, okay, I'm ready to
Yeah.
start mixing it up more. But it sounds like, you know, I mean, it seems from conversation that maybe focusing in on one thing for a little while is the thing to do. And then, keeping your kind of ears and eyes peeled for, you know, other techniques and other things that you might be interested in the future, but not necessarily devoting a huge amount of time for them. For a little while,
All
I
right.
think is a good thing to
So
do.
on that note, thank you so much to Ben for coming on my channel and joining me on this stream. I hope everyone watching has been able to take away some of the really great insights Ben's been able to give us on how our brains actually work when we're learning and what to focus on when we're learning, as well as just, how to actually start learning. And it is not apparently sitting here binging through author YouTube on everything to do with marketing or craft or whatever else it might be. However, if you are still a little bit undecided on what you want to focus on in terms of your learning goals for 2022, I do want to let everyone know that Ben has a great video on his channel, which is on how to get the most out of YouTube when you're trying to use YouTube for learning, which I think all of us here actually do. I know the first thing when I can't figure out how to do something is I literally go and YouTube it. So there is a link in the description below so that you can go and check out Ben's video, and I will put up a copy of the video on screen here. But I just thank you so much, Ben, for coming along today and for giving me such a comprehensive critique of my not learning goal of learn marketing, because I really feel confident now that I can take this away and go work on this plan some more, and hopefully I will have some progress to update you all on in terms of my newsletter at the end of March. Fingers crossed, that is the goal. All right, thank you so much to everyone watching. I will see you guys tomorrow again for another writing live stream. Otherwise, I will see you guys next week in next week's regular video. Bye, guys.